The first time I met Robert Harrington, I didn't realize he was my boyfriend's father. I only knew him as the older man at the bus stop, the one I offered to share my umbrella with as the rain started coming down hard. And when he looked at me and whispered, "Wait, you're Anna." Something in his voice made the moment feel strange. For a second, everything seemed to go quiet except for the sound of the rain. I remember blinking, feeling confused, and trying to figure out if I knew him from somewhere. I was sure I didn't. And yet he said my name like he had known me for a long time. That moment, standing on the wet sidewalk under a gray sky with a stranger who somehow knew my name, was how this whole thing started. But to understand how it all turned out, you would have to know who I was before that day. I was Captain Anna Reed, U.S. Marine Corps, 31 years old, and I was proud of my career. I had spent most of my 20s deployed, managing supply logistics and helping with disaster relief after hurricanes hit the Gulf. My friends used to joke that I could probably build a field base using just duct tape and determination. I was never married and didn't even take long vacations. The Marine Corps was my life, my routine, and my purpose. Then, about a year ago, I met Mark Harrington at a charity event for veterans in Norfolk. He wasn't in the military. He was a businessman, always in a nice suit, with a calm voice and a friendly smile. He was a good listener, and he made me laugh, which felt like a relief after years of deployments. We started dating whenever I was back in town. After a while, he started talking about a future together. The problem wasn't Mark, it was his parents. His mother, Eleanor, came from a wealthy Virginia family. His father, Admiral Robert Harrington, was a retired naval commander who now owned a major shipyard. They lived in a different world than I did, one filled with fancy dinners, private clubs, and inherited wealth. I, on the other hand, was the daughter of a small-town auto mechanic from Roanoke. My father had also been a Marine for 2 tours before he died in a training accident when I was 14. When Mark told his parents he was dating a Marine, they smiled politely, but when he mentioned I was planning to make a career out of it, their smiles disappeared. "She's not our type of person," his mother had supposedly told him. His father didn't say anything, but sometimes silence is worse than criticism. Still, Mark insisted they would like me once they met me. He set up a dinner, saying it would just be a quiet evening at his family's home. I wanted to believe him. That Saturday afternoon, the sky turned a dark gray before I even left the base. By the time I got to the city, it was raining so hard I could barely see the stoplights. The traffic was terrible, my wipers couldn't keep up, and I could feel my uniform blouse starting to get damp. I had to park 3 blocks away from the Harrington mansion, partly because I wanted to, and partly because the street was full of expensive cars that made my old Honda Civic look out of place. I grabbed my umbrella, the standard issue green one I always kept from my logistics days. As I started walking, I noticed him, an older man in a long brown coat standing under the small roof of a bus stop shelter with rain pooling around his feet. He wasn't holding an umbrella, just a folded newspaper that was getting soaked. Something about the way he stood, with his back straight and his hands behind him, reminded me of the officers I used to salute. My instincts took over. I stopped next to him and moved my umbrella to cover him too. "Sir, you'll get soaked if you stay there," I said. He turned his head, looking surprised, and then gave me a small smile. "Thank you, young lady. Not many people stop these days." "It's no trouble," I replied. "I'm just heading a few blocks up." He chuckled, his voice a bit rough but steady. "And here I thought Marines only moved in formation." I laughed a little. "Old habits die hard." We stood there for a minute, sharing the small space under the umbrella as cars drove past, splashing water. The rain was steady. It had that specific Virginia smell of wet pavement, salt from the coast, and a faint smell of pine trees. Then he asked, "Where are you headed, young lady?" I hesitated for a moment. "The Harrington residence. I'm meeting my boyfriend's parents." The man's expression changed. The smile went away. He blinked slowly, as if he was trying to understand what I'd said. Then he looked at me, really looked at me. His voice was quiet, barely louder than the rain. "Wait, you're Anna?" I froze. "Yes, sir," I said, feeling cautious. Do I know you?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes seemed to soften for a second, then looked serious again, like he was bracing for something. Have a good evening, Captain, he murmured, almost to himself. Then he stepped out from under the umbrella and started walking away into the rain. I watched him go, the water soaking his coat, until it looked almost black. Something about his tone made me feel uneasy, but I didn't have time to think about it. I was already late. By the time I reached the front gate, the rain had eased up. The Harrington mansion was huge. It had white columns, stone lions, and a driveway long enough to be a runway. I took a deep breath, tried to straighten my damp uniform, and told myself, "You've given briefings to generals and survived sandstorms. You can handle one dinner with a rich family." Still, that man's voice stuck in my head. "Wait, you're Anna. How did he know my name? And why did he sound so disappointed?" I didn't know it then, but the answer to that question would change everything. My relationship, my ideas about social class, and even what I thought honor meant. Sometimes life doesn't put you in a battle. It just shows you who you are. And that night, I was about to find out exactly what kind of person I was. And when the butler opened the door, I realized just how out of place I looked. My uniform was damp, my shoes squeaked on the marble floor, and my hair, which I had pinned up, was starting to come loose. The entry hall smelled like floor polish and was uncomfortably quiet. Every step I took seemed to echo, as if the house itself was judging me. Mark appeared at the top of the stairs, looking relieved to see me. "Anna," he said, jogging down to meet me and taking my umbrella. I was starting to worry. "Are you okay?" I gave him a small smile. "Just a little wet. Traffic was slow." He kissed my cheek, not seeming to mind my damp sleeve. "Come on, Mom is setting the table." I followed him down a hallway lined with portraits of people in old-fashioned uniforms, women in pearls and medals displayed under soft lights. It was a whole family history on display. When we entered the dining room, his mother was standing by a long oak table, arranging silverware very precisely. She didn't look up right away. When she did, her eyes scanned over me once and then stopped, her expression barely polite. "Oh," she said with a thin smile. "You made it." "I did, ma'am. Thank you for having me." "Of course." Her voice was polite but distant. "Mark, dear, maybe show Anna where she can freshen up. Her uniform must be uncomfortable after the rain." "I'm fine," I said quickly. I'd rather just stay as I am." She hesitated, pressing her lips together. "If you're sure." It was the kind of "if you're sure" that really meant you're making the wrong choice. Mark poured some wine. "Dad should be home any minute. He got held up at the shipyard." I tried to sound casual. "Your father still works?" "Retired, technically," Eleanor said, taking her seat. "But the shipyard is his pride. He built it from nothing after he left the Navy." I nodded. "That's impressive." She smiled again, a tight, polished smile. "He believes in discipline. You must understand that." "I do, ma'am, I said. "It's something we have in common." Her eyebrow twitched. "Ah, yes. Marines." It wasn't what she said, but how she said it, as if the word left a bad taste in her mouth. Dinner started with small talk that felt like it had sharp edges. Mark tried to keep things positive, telling stories about a trip we took to Charleston and a stray dog I'd helped find a home for. Eleanor listened, but kept glancing at the ribbons on my uniform. "Do you plan to stay in the military?" she asked suddenly. "Yes, ma'am, I'm career." "I see." She tilted her wine glass. "And after that?" "After that, I'll probably teach logistics, or maybe work in humanitarian coordination." Her lips curved just a little. "So, not the corporate type." "Mom," Mark cut in. She waved a hand at him. "I'm only asking. It's important for a woman to think about stability." "Service can be stable," I said politely, "if your foundation is strong." She smiled again, the way people smile when they've already decided they're right. Of course. I looked down. I looked at my plate and told myself to just breathe. My years in uniform had trained me to handle worse things, like shouting officers and emergency situations. But this kind of polite cruelty was a different kind of challenge. Halfway through dinner, the door opened. I turned, and my breath caught in my throat. The old man from the bus stop was standing there, now dry and wearing a navy blue blazer. "Robert," Eleanor exclaimed, "we were just talking about you." He froze when he saw me. For just a second, I could almost hear the sound of the rain again, even though we were inside. Mark stood up. "Dad, this is Anna Reed." "I know who she is," Admiral Harrington said quietly. The room fell silent. He set his coat on a rack and walked slowly to his seat at the head of the table. I stood up automatically, the way Marines do when a superior officer enters. Old habits. He gave me a short nod. "Captain Reed," he said, his voice flat. "Yes, sir," I replied. Eleanor looked back and forth between us, confused. "You've met?" "Briefly," he said. "At the bus stop." Her eyes widened. "At the bus stop?" He didn't say anything else. Mark, not sensing the tension, laughed nervously. "Small world, huh?" No one else laughed. The rest of the meal was extremely awkward. The Admiral barely said a word. When he did, it was just to ask for the salt or more water. I could feel his eyes on me, watching me, measuring me, the way officers look at new recruits. Eleanor, sensing something was wrong but not knowing what, tried to be extra polite, which almost made it worse. "So, Captain," she started again, "what does your family do?" "My father was a Marine," I said. "He ran a small repair shop after he retired." Her smile wavered. "Oh, manual labor?" "Yes, ma'am. He believed in fixing things." The Admiral's fork stopped moving. His jaw looked tight. He muttered something. "So did I." Eleanor frowned. "Robert?" He shook his head. "Nothing." Mark tried to change the subject. "Dad, did you hear Anna coordinated a supply run after the last hurricane? Her unit saved 3 coastal towns from running out of food." I shot him a look. He was just trying to help, but I didn't like being bragged about. The Admiral leaned back. "Yes. I read the commendation." "You read it?" I asked, surprised. His eyes were hard to read. "I review every logistics report from that district." Old habit. For a moment, I thought I saw his expression soften, but then it was gone. He put down his fork and stood up. "Excuse me." Eleanor looked confused. "Robert, we haven't finished." He walked out. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the hall. No one spoke for almost a minute. Finally, Eleanor sighed. "He's been distant lately." Mark rubbed my hand under the table. "Don't take it personally." But I did. Because something about that look, something in his silence, told me this was about more than just him disapproving of me. It wasn't just that he didn't like me, it was that he recognized me from somewhere I couldn't place. Later that night, when Mark drove me back to my car, the storm had passed. The streets were still wet, shining under the streetlights. He reached for my hand. "They'll come around, just give it time." I forced a smile. "Sure." But as I looked at the mansion's reflection in the puddles, all I could hear was that voice in the rain. "Wait, you're Anna." And now, his silence at dinner seemed to confirm what his voice hadn't. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. The rain on his coat, the surprise in his eyes when I told him the address, the strange tone in his voice when he'd said my name. I kept asking myself, how did a retired admiral know a Marine captain he'd never met? By sunrise, I gave up on trying to sleep and did what Marines do. I made coffee that was way too strong and went for a run along the harbor. The tide was high and the air smelled like salt and diesel. Gulls were screaming overhead. It should have cleared my head, but it didn't. Mark called around 9. "Morning, Captain," he said, trying to be playful. "You alive?" "Barely," he sighed. "Look, last night was rough. My parents can be difficult, but it'll get better." "Your dad didn't say 10 words to me." "He's always like that. Military type, doesn't show emotion." I've served under men like him, I said quietly. They show emotion, just not the kind you want to see. He laughed uneasily. He's not angry at you. Maybe he's just surprised. Surprised about what? I don't know, maybe because you remind him of someone. He's been acting strange lately. Strange how? Withdrawn. He spends hours in his office going through old Navy reports even though he's retired. It's like he's looking for something he lost. Those words stuck with me. Old Navy reports. Him recognizing my name. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but a memory started to surface. There was a disaster 3 years ago. A Navy convoy off the Florida coast had almost been lost during a supply operation after Hurricane Delilah. My Marine unit had been redirected to help. I had worked for 72 hours straight, coordinating emergency shipments and rerouting cargo from a damaged naval vessel called the Pathfinder. I never met the commanding officer, but I remembered the name on the official reports, Rear Admiral Robert Harrington. The thought hit me like cold water. Could that be him? I spent the morning at the base trying to work, but I couldn't focus. By noon, I decided to stop wondering and just ask. I called the Admiral's office at the shipyard, but it went to voicemail, so I sent him a message. It was short, respectful, and professional. Admiral Harrington, this is Captain Anna Reed. I would appreciate a brief meeting when you have time regarding last night. Respectfully, Captain Reed? I almost deleted it 3 times before I finally hit send. That evening, he replied, Captain Reed, 1800 hours, Harrington Shipyard, main office, bring your, credentials. The way the message was worded told me this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. At 6 o'clock sharp, I pulled into the shipyard parking lot. It was huge, with acres of cranes and dry docks lit up by industrial lights. A large flag was flying above the main building. Inside, the Admiral's office was perfectly orderly, even more so than a Marine's office. He had framed citations on the wall, a model of a destroyer on his desk, and family photos arranged by height. He was standing by the window when I came in, hands behind his back, looking out at the sunset. Captain Reed, he said, without turning around. Sir? I saluted out of habit. At ease. He finally turned to face me. You requested this meeting. Yes, sir. I just wanted to clear the air. He nodded slowly. You're a logistics officer, correct? Yes, sir. 3rd Marine Logistics Group. He leaned against his desk, his eyes sharp. Do you know how many reports I've signed that had your name on them? I can't say that I do, sir. I do, he said. Dozens. Supply coordination, emergency deployment reports, BAS, and the Pathfinder relief convoy. You saved that mission. My throat felt dry. You were commanding that fleet. He nodded once. And you were the one who rerouted those fuel lines before the explosion. You saved 50 sailors, including me. I blinked. I didn't know that, sir. We were just doing our job. Most people would have made sure I did know. They would have used it to get a promotion. With respect, sir, that's not how Marines think. He studied me for a long time. The silence in the room grew heavy. Finally, he said, You remind me of my daughter. I froze. Your daughter? He looked past me, his voice getting rough. She was a Marine. She died in a training accident 8 years ago. Her name was Sarah. He paused. She was the same age as you are now. My chest felt tight. I'm sorry, sir. He nodded, seeming distracted. So am I. He turned away again, looking back out the window at the cranes. When you said that address last night, it just hit me. For a second, I thought he didn't finish the sentence. I understand, I said quietly. But, sir, I didn't mean to cause any discomfort. He waved his hand. No, Captain, you didn't. My discomfort has been there for years. We stood in silence. The hum of the shipyard work filled the room. Steel moving, men shouting orders, the sounds of work, and it felt like regret. Then he said, You're seeing my son. Yes, sir. Do you love him? I do. He met my eyes. Then don't let him think less of his country just because his father forgot what honor looks like. That line surprised me. It wasn't an apology, but it was close. He walked around his desk and opened a drawer. He pulled out a folded commendation letter, my own report from the Pathfinder mission years ago. He handed it to me. I kept it, he said, to remind myself that some people still do the right thing when no one is watching. I took the paper from him. Thank you, sir. He nodded. You will have dinner with my family again tomorrow. My request, sir, I'll handle my wife. He dismissed me with a simple gesture. As I walked out, I felt like a weight had shifted. It wasn't gone, but it was lighter. That night, I sat in my car for a while, holding the paper, watching the shipyard lights flicker. I wasn't sure if this was a truce or just the start of another fight, but for the first time since the rain, I felt like I understood the weight that came with my own name. The next evening, I ironed my marine dress blue uniform until the creases were perfectly sharp. I told myself it wasn't about impressing the admiral or his wife. It was about showing respect for the uniform and for the situation. Still, my stomach was in knots the whole drive there. I didn't get nervous in combat zones anymore, but dinner tables were a different story. The Harrington home looked different in the daylight. It seemed less like a fortress and more like an old monument. When I parked, I saw the admiral outside in the garden, talking to a groundskeeper. He saw me and lifted a hand in a small, genuine greeting. It was the first time I'd seen him smile. Eleanor opened the door before I could knock. Her eyes went to my uniform and then to my face. Oh, you're early, she said, her voice cautious. Yes, ma'am. The admiral asked me to come by before dinner. Her jaw tightened a little when I used his title. Of course he did. Inside, the house smelled of lemon polish and old books. The admiral was waiting in the study. His jacket was off, and he was wearing reading glasses. He stood up when I entered, still formal. Captain Reed, he said, nodding. Sir, thank you for inviting me. He pointed to a chair for me to sit. Eleanor stayed by the doorway, looking suspicious but staying quiet. I wanted to clear the air, he said, about last night. Sir, there's nothing to apologize for. He held up a hand. Maybe not, but I owe you the truth. He looked at his wife. Eleanor, would you excuse us? Her smile was brittle. If I must. She left, closing the door quietly behind her. The admiral's shoulders seemed to drop as if he'd been holding up a heavy weight. When I recognized your name, it brought back a memory I've been avoiding for years, he began. My daughter, Sarah, died in a marine training accident. She was your age. She had that same quiet determination in her eyes. After she died, I told myself I'd never let another Marine into this house. There were too many ghosts already. I sat perfectly still. The silence in the room felt heavy. He continued, his voice shaking just a little. But when I read your name on those reports, I couldn't stop. You save people, Captain. You save my men. I admired you long before I knew you'd be standing in my entryway. I swallowed. Sir, I don't deserve that kind of praise. I was just doing my duty. He gave a dry chuckle. That's exactly what my daughter used to say. His eyes softened for a second, then he looked serious again, as if he was afraid of showing too much. Mark doesn't know any of this, he said. He just thinks I disapprove of you because you're in the military. The truth is, I disapprove because you remind me of what I lost. That felt like a punch to the gut. I didn't mean to. I know, he interrupted gently. You don't have to apologize for being alive. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the ticking of a clock. Dinner that night was smaller, just the four of us. There were no other guests and none of the stiff formality from before. Mark looked relieved. Eleanor looked like she was extremely uncomfortable. The conversation was careful, sticking to safe topics like the weather, the traffic, and the price of gas. Then Eleanor said, I hear you've been promoted, Captain. Congratulations. Thank you, ma'am, I said cautiously. She smiled tightly. Though, I do wonder, Doesn't rank make it difficult for a woman to have a family? The Admiral's fork stopped. Mark's jaw tightened. I kept my voice steady. Sometimes it does, but honor and love don't always follow the same schedule. Eleanor tilted her head. Such poetic answers. I suppose the military teaches that, too. Eleanor, the Admiral said quietly, that's enough. She blinked, looking offended. I was just making conversation. He put down his fork. You're making it at another Marine's expense. Not in my house. The air went cold. She stared at him, then at me, as if trying to figure out what had caused this shift in her husband's loyalty. I wanted to break the tension, so I changed the subject. Your garden is beautiful, ma'am, the roses especially. Her voice softened just a little. Thank you. Robert planted those for our daughter. The Admiral looked down at his plate. Sarah loved yellow roses. The table fell silent again. I could feel their pain in the air, the kind of old sadness that never really goes away. After dinner, Eleanor excused herself early, saying something about a phone call. Mark walked me to the porch. The night air smelled like wet grass and salt. She's not bad, he said softly. Just proud. I know, I said. Pride is heavy, it's hard to put down. He smiled. You always sound like you're teaching me something. Maybe I am. He took my hand. I love you, Anna. I love you too. Behind the curtains, I could see the Admiral watching us. His expression was hard to read. He turned away when our eyes met, but I knew he'd seen us. Before I left, the Admiral followed me out to the porch. I owe you another apology, he said. Sir? For letting my pride make me forget my gratitude. You don't owe me anything, Admiral. He gave a small, tired smile. Maybe not, but I want to give it anyway. He held out his hand. I shook it. It was a firm, respectful handshake. Thank you for sharing your daughter's story, I said. She'd be proud of you. He looked up at the stars. Maybe one day I'll believe. Maybe one day I'll... That... I drove away with the image of him still standing there, an old officer surrounded by ghosts, finally learning to show respect to the living. When I got home, I hung up my uniform neatly and sat on my bed in the quiet. Some people spend their lives chasing medals or promotions, but sometimes the biggest victory is forgiving the people who don't know how to love you until it's almost too late. I didn't know it yet, but that dinner had cracked something open in the Harrington family. All the pride, grief, and resentment they used as armor. And as I've learned, cracks are how the light gets in. The next morning, I was on base looking at deployment schedules when my phone started buzzing. It was Mark calling 3 times in a row. When I finally answered, his voice was sharp and angry. Anna, what did you say to my father last night? My stomach dropped. Why? What happened? He called a family meeting. He told my mother he's been blind. He said he misjudged you. Now she's furious. I let out a slow breath. Mark, I didn't say anything. He just talked about his daughter, that's all. He hasn't mentioned Sarah in years, he said, his voice softer now. Whatever you did, it really shook him. I didn't do anything special, I replied. Maybe he just remembered what it means to respect someone. He paused. I could hear the wind through his car window. Can you come over tonight? Please? When I got to the house, the tension was so thick you could feel it. Eleanor was sitting stiffly in the living room, wearing pearls that looked like armor. The Admiral stood near the fireplace, Mana behind his back, his posture as straight as if he were on the deck of a ship. Mark was pacing, his tie pulled loose. Captain Reed, the Admiral greeted me formally. Sir, Eleanor didn't look up. You're early again. Mark cleared his throat. We're all here. Can we please just talk about this like normal people? His mother's voice cut him off. Define normal, Mark. Is it normal for my husband to embarrass me at dinner? To defend someone he barely knows? She's not just someone, the Admiral said quietly. Eleanor turned on him. Oh? Then who is she? He took a deep breath, his eyes on the fire. She's the Marine who saved my command 3 years ago. Without her, 50 men would be dead, including me. The room went completely silent. Eleanor blinked, her anger turning into confusion. What are you talking about? The Pathfinder, he said. Hurricane Delilah. The supply convoy failure. Her name was on every logistics report. I read them a dozen times and never once thanked her. I tried to speak, but my throat felt tight. Sir, that was a team effort. He held up a hand. Don't, and I've led enough teams to know leadership when I see it. Eleanor's voice wavered. Robert, why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to admit that the woman I dismissed because of her background had more honor than I've shown in 20 years. The confession just hung in the air. Mark stepped closer to him, his eyes wide. Dad? But the Admiral wasn't finished. He turned to me. You told me last night that pride is heavy. You were right. I've been carrying mine for too long. Eleanor's face turned red. And what about our family's dignity? You'd just throw it away to make a scene. He looked at her with a quiet, steely expression. Dignity isn't something you wear to dinner, Eleanor. It's something you show to people who have earned it. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The argument continued like a slow-burning fire, polite and controlled, but intensely honest. For every accusation she made, he answered with a calm fact. For every bitter word she said, Mark winced, looking like a son caught between his parents. Finally, Eleanor stood up. I won't sit here and be lectured in my own home. Then stand, the Admiral said, his voice low but commanding. But listen while you do. You once told me you'd never have a Marine in this family. Well, that already happened. She saved our lives before we even met her. Eleanor's eyes looked over at me. It wasn't hatred in her look anymore, but disbelief. I could have left right then, but something made me stay. Ma'am, I said softly. I know this is uncomfortable. I didn't mean to come between your family. I just came here to meet you honestly. Whatever you think of me, I'll respect it. She stared at me for a long time, then very slightly, her shoulders relaxed. You speak like my daughter used to. The Admiral blinked. Eleanor, she would have been your age, she said quietly. Always doing things her own way, always bringing home stray dogs and people. Tears started to well up in her eyes before she looked away. Dinner is in an hour, she whispered. I'll set the table. And just like that, she walked out of the room, her heels clicking on the floor. After she left, the Admiral turned to me. I don't expect gratitude, he said, but I do owe you one thing, a proper salute. He stepped back, straightened his posture, and raised his hand. Seeing a man like him salute me almost made me lose my composure. I returned the salute. With respect, sir, you don't owe me that. He lowered his hand. Son, maybe not, but I needed to remember what it felt like. Mark came up behind me, putting a hand on my shoulder. You realize you just caused a family revolution, right? I smiled a little. Wouldn't be my first. He laughed quietly, the tension finally breaking. You're amazing. You know that? Hardly, I said. I just told the truth. The Admiral nodded, almost to himself. That's exactly why it mattered. Dinner that night was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. Eleanor didn't make any sharp comments or sigh. She listened. She asked questions, small, cautious human questions. By the time dessert came, it had started to rain again outside. The Admiral looked at me across the table and said, Captain Reed, if you ever consider leaving the service, the shipyard could use someone like you. Eleanor added softly, and maybe our family too. I smiled, feeling humbled. Thank you, ma'am, but for now, the Corps still needs me. The Admiral grinned. So did I once. We all laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it finally felt safe to. When I left that night, Mark walked me to my car. The rain was steady and familiar, the same kind of rain that had started everything. He opened his umbrella and held it over both of us. Funny, he said. A year ago, you said you didn't believe in destiny. I still don't, I said, smiling, but I believe in weather. He chuckled. And honor. I nodded. That too. As he leaned in to kiss me, lightning flashed, lighting up the clouds for a brief second. Some storms don't destroy things. Some storms just wash things clean. A week later, I was back at the base. Life was supposed to be normal again. Early morning physical training, coffee that tasted like rust, and endless paperwork. But something felt different. Every time I saluted the flag, I thought of Admiral Harrington standing in his living room, saluting me. Still, I wasn't sure what to do with the feeling that was left over, something between gratitude and a sense that things weren't quite finished. That afternoon, my commanding officer called me into his office. Captain Reed, he said, holding a folder, "You've got visitors. One Admiral Robert Harrington, retired." I blinked. He's here? He's here, my CO confirmed, and he's waiting right outside my door, looking like he still runs the Navy. Try not to make him cry. When I stepped out, the Admiral was standing at parade rest, wearing his full dress uniform. His chest was covered in ribbons and stars, but his expression was humble, almost nervous. He straightened up when he saw me. "Captain Reed." "Sir, I didn't come for a ceremony," he said. I came for the truth." He handed me a folder. It was old, the edges were worn, and the paper inside was yellowed. "These are copies of the Pathfinder mission files," he said. "After you left the Navy's joint operation, I rewrote the report. I took credit for the reroute order." I froze. "Sir, why are you telling me this now?" "Because it was wrong. You saved 50 men. I was supposed to acknowledge you. Instead, I let the system bury your name because it made me uncomfortable that someone younger, someone outside my chain of command had saved me." I didn't know what to say. He kept going, his voice cracking just a little. "I've lived long enough to know that honor isn't about what people write on plaques. It's about what you admit when no one is clapping." He looked directly into my eyes. "I came here to correct the record." I opened the folder. On top was a new commendation draft signed and dated by him. My name was listed first. "Sir, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." We walked down to the training field. Recruits were running drills, shouting in rhythm in the humid Virginia air. When they saw him, they immediately stood straighter, a legend in person. The Admiral faced me. "Captain, front and center," I obeyed, standing tall, not sure what was happening. He spoke loudly, enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Marines, this officer saved my command 3 years ago. I never gave her the recognition she earned, so today I'm correcting that." He turned to me and saluted. It was a crisp, perfect salute, and his hand was trembling slightly. For a second, no one moved. Then slowly, the entire training field saluted too. I returned his salute, my jaw tight and my heart pounding. When he lowered his hand, he said quietly, "That was for my men. The apology is for me." We went to the officers' lounge afterward. The mood was less formal, more human. He took off his hat and looked at it like it held the weight of decades. "I read your service record again last night," he said. "It's impressive. I just try to do my job." He smiled faintly. "That's what I told myself for 40 years, but sometimes doing your job means admitting when you failed someone." He took a slow sip of coffee. "I want you to understand something, Captain. My daughter's death, it made me cold. I thought if I controlled everything, I could keep loss from happening again. That's why I hated you before I even met you. Because you were what I couldn't protect her from becoming." My throat tightened. "Sir, you don't owe me your story." He shook his head. "I owe you the truth." He placed his wedding ring on the table for a moment, tracing its edge. "Eleanor and I stopped talking about Sarah years ago. We built this house full of rules instead of memories. You cracked it open. I don't know how, but you did." "Maybe because I'm a Marine," I said softly. We don't run from storms, we walk through them." He chuckled. Then maybe that's what I need to learn to do. Before he left, he said, "My wife and I are hosting a dinner next week. Small family only. You'll be there." "Sir, I don't—" "That's an order, Captain." I smiled. "Yes, sir." As he walked out, I saw the sunlight glinting off his ribbons. They didn't look like decorations anymore. They looked like reminders. That night, I sat by the harbor again, watching the water. Behind me, the shipyard cranes stood like old guards. I thought about the first time I'd seen him, a rain-soaked stranger at a bus stop, and how much had changed in just a few weeks. He wasn't the same man, and if I was honest, neither was I. It's strange how bitterness can look like strength. It's even stranger how forgiveness can show up in the form of a quiet salute. A few days later, I got a message from the Navy Office of Records. The commendation update had been approved. My name would finally appear on the official mission citation next to the admiral's. There were no speeches or ceremonies, just a small change in a dusty file that somehow felt like a resolution. Mark called that night, his voice light. "Mom's cooking again. That's how I know miracles are real." I laughed. She must be in a good mood. She is. She wants to apologize to you herself. I froze. That's unexpected. He chuckled. "You've had that effect on people lately." "Maybe rain does that," I said. He paused. "Rain. It washes off everything that doesn't matter." As I hung up, I looked at my reflection in the dark window, the uniform, the tired eyes, the small smile. I thought of my father and all the hard times he'd gone through without losing his kindness. Maybe that's what honor really is. Not medals or family names, but the quiet decision to stay decent when life gives you every reason to harden. And maybe, just maybe, sharing an umbrella with a stranger in the rain was never random at all. The following Friday evening, I stood once again at the gates of the Harrington estate. This time, the air felt lighter, not judgmental, but welcoming. The rain clouds that had been following me for weeks were gone. The sky was a soft orange over the trees, and the flag by the porch was swaying gently. I walked up the steps holding a bouquet of flowers. Not roses this time, but white lilies. My father used to say they were flowers that listen, calm and forgiving. It felt right. Eleanor opened the door herself. Her hair was pinned up, her dress was simple, and her eyes were warmer than I remembered. "Captain Reed," she said softly. "Or should I say Anna?" "Anna is fine," I said. "And you look beautiful, ma'am." She smiled, a real one this time. "Thank you for coming." I wouldn't miss it. Inside, the house smelled like baked bread and roasted herbs. The table was set for 4 again, but the fancy silver candlesticks and crystal glasses were gone. Tonight, it looked like a home, not a museum. Mark came out of the kitchen wearing an apron. "Don't say a word," he warned, grinning. "Mom made me stir the gravy." I laughed. "She's training you well." "She's trying." Then the Admiral entered. He wasn't wearing a uniform or medals, just a navy sweater and a calm expression. "Captain Reed," he greeted me. "Admiral," I said automatically, then corrected myself. "Sorry, Mr. Harrington." He smiled. "Let's stick with Robert tonight." Dinner started quietly, but it wasn't awkward. The pace was slower, easier. It was the kind of peace that comes after everyone has finally said the things they needed to say. At one point, Eleanor cleared her throat. "Anna, I owe you something." "You don't, ma'am." "I do," she said firmly. "When you first came here, I looked at you and I saw everything I didn't understand. Discipline, duty, loss. I thought it made you hard, but now I see it just made you decent." I swallowed, feeling moved. "Thank you, that means a lot." She nodded. "It should have come sooner." The Admiral reached over and placed his hand on top of hers. "Pride," he said quietly, "is the armor we wear when we're afraid to be small." She looked at him, surprised. You've been reading those leadership books again. He smiled. No, I've just been watching someone braver than me handle it better. His eyes flicked over to me. After dessert, we moved to the porch. The night was still, the crickets were loud, and the air had that familiar coastal smell of salt and pine. The Admiral lit a small, old lantern that used to sit in his study. He said, "This belonged to Sarah. She used to take it when she camped in the backyard." Eleanor's hand tightened on her teacup. He turned to me. "I'd like you to have it." I blinked. "Sir, I can't." "You can," he said. "Because you remind us that honor doesn't die when people do. It just gets passed on." He placed the lantern in my hands. The metal was cool and the glass was worn. Inside, the candle flickered gently. "Thank you," I said softly. "I'll take care of it." "I know you will." Mark leaned against the railing, smiling as he watched us. "You know, when I told Mom I was dating a Marine, she said it would never last." Eleanor sighed. "And I was wrong." He laughed. "Don't worry, I've got it recorded." We all laughed. A real laugh, the kind that feels good. As I looked at them, the proud mother, the humbled father, and the son who had waited for peace to find his family, I felt a deep sense of closure. The kind that doesn't need an award ceremony. Later that night, when I stood up to leave, the Admiral walked me to my car. "Captain?" He caught himself. "Anna." "Yes, sir." "You once told me Marines don't run from storms, they walk through them." "Yes." He nodded with a, "You walked through ours. Thank you for not turning away." I smiled. I didn't do anything special. I just held the umbrella. He chuckled softly. "You'd be surprised how few people do." He looked up at the sky, which was calm and full of stars. "My daughter would have liked you." "I think she already does," I said gently. Driving away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The porch light was still on, and the three of them were standing there together. They weren't perfect, and they weren't fixed, but they were whole. On the passenger seat next to me sat the lantern, its small flame staying steady as I drove. I realized something then. Sometimes revenge doesn't mean making people suffer. Sometimes it just means making them see. Because there are moments when life doesn't punish you with loss, but redeems you with grace. Moments when forgiveness becomes the sharpest kind of justice. Weeks later, I went back to the harbor on my day off. The rain started again, soft, steady, and familiar. I took out the same umbrella I'd once shared with a stranger. The fabric was a little torn now and the metal was bent, but it still opened. A young Marine recruit nearby had forgotten his hat and was getting drenched. I walked over and held the umbrella over him. He looked startled. "Ma'am, you don't have to." "Sure I do," I said. "It's tradition." He smiled, looking grateful. "Thank you, Captain." I walked away, the rain pattering on the umbrella, the lantern's reflection showing in the puddles at my feet. I thought, maybe that's what honor really is. Not what you've earned or what people say about you. Just the quiet, stubborn decision to keep sharing your shelter, even when you've already walked through the storm. If you've ever been misjudged or looked down on, don't let it make you hard. If someone once made you feel small, don't carry their bitterness. Carry your kindness. It's heavier, yes, but it's the kind of weight that keeps your soul upright. Because one day someone will look at you, maybe in the rain, maybe at a bus stop, and realize that grace has been standing right next to them all along. And when that happens, I hope you'll share your umbrella too.